This show is brought to you by Safety FM.
What's up, peeps? It is the last interview of the Safety 1, Safety 2 mini-series. Not the last episode, but the last interview. Let's jump into the intro and I'll tell you more about today's guest.
The problem in safety isn't deviation, it's complexity.
Health and safety has gone mad.
Health and safety is trying to unpick having gone mad in the past.
There's no one solution and one problem. The problem is that we are looking for one solution.
Does the structure of the team allow them to flourish?
Feel safe enough to be uncomfortable.
The environment defines our behaviours.
People aren't the problem, they're the solution.
Rebranding Safety, crushing the stereotype. Brought to you by Riskfluent. What's up, peeps? Welcome back to Rebranding Safety. Rebranding Safety is the podcast and YouTube channel doing exactly what it says on a tin. We're here to change the perception of health and safety, and we do that right here. I've already said that, where we do it. Damn, I need to nail down this intro. Okay, today's guest, yet again, another legend. I mean, there's just so many of them. We can't talk to them all. Yes, we can. Yes, we can talk to them all. That is our life goal, to talk to all these legends. And today is one of my favourites because this guy is so cool. Like, you listen to him in one thing and it's just like, you're like, oh wow, this guy's so professional and like really intelligent. And then you listen to him on something else or you chat to him and it's like, oh, this is just like a dude down the pub, like effing and blinding and stuff. Like, it just love the guy. Like, yeah, proper fanboy. Has a huge background, extensive background in senior safety roles, and after 18 years of those, completed a PhD in the safety sciences at the legendary Griffith University. Now is the managing director of a company called Forge Works, and if you know, you know. An Adjunct Research Fellow of Safety Science Innovation Lab. Now, I don't know if I said adjunct right, because to me that sounds like a terrible word. But, you know, if you're in the researcher space, safety science space, then let me know if that's the right word. But basically, he does research for Safety Science Innovation Lab at Griffith University, where he's supervising and conducting industry-based safety science research. And some of the stuff this guy's produced, obviously in partnership with other people, is nothing short of amazing work. Nothing short of like tone setting for the future. Definitely thinks this guy's work is the type of work we'll look back on. And sorry, my mum was ringing me. I think definitely we will look back on this guy's work and hopefully look back on it with learning from Carsten Busch, a little bit of local rationality. But I genuinely think this will stand the test of time. I think a lot of stuff he does is outstanding and we need to hear it now, and I think we'll continue to need to hear it for a long time. So today's guest works heavily in Australia in the safety differently space, and in addition he has partnered up with Drew Rea to, unfortunately, as much as it pains me to say, deliver what I think is one of the best, actually, I'm going to say it. I think him and Drew Rea partnered up to deliver the best safety podcast there is. Yes, even better than mine. I just think it's such an outstanding idea because it fits me so well. The podcast is called Safety of Work Podcast. Now you definitely know who today's guest is. It's David Provan. The Safety of Work podcast is just outstanding. And I don't want to talk about too much because it's inevitable that I'm going to fanboy over it in the reflection episode. But if you haven't listened already, make sure you do. Add this to your follow list because it is outstanding. If you want to know what's going on in the research and science space, but you cannot be asked to read all those really complicated, wordy, horrible documents with citations that bounce you from left to right all over the place, you don't want to read all that stuff. You can't be asked. You haven't got the time, but you do have to walk the dog twice a day. Safety of Work podcast is the one for you, 100%. So anyway, without further ado, let's hear from David Provan. I will caveat this conversation just briefly to say that we do talk about a lot of stuff, but there is a fair chunk of it which is very relevant to this Safety 1, Safety 2 space, very relevant to what a safety professional may or should look like in the future. So we talk about a lot of stuff. We talk about his work. We talk about podcasts. We talk about loads of stuff. As per usual, you know, I like to keep it nice and emergent. So it wasn't solidly down one kind of focused route. However, in my opinion, it does fit really well into this mini-series. If you disagree, feel free to subscribe and like. And then once you've done that, you're allowed to comment as much as you want. And then you can just be as horrible as you like. Or you can just scroll past and go listen to something else if you want, like Safety of Work podcast. Anyway, I'm going to stop waffling on. Let's get into today's conversation with the legendary David Provan.
All right, David, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, James. It's great to be on your show.
Well, it's great to have you on. You've quite quickly become a legend in the podcasting world.
Oh, I feel kind of like I'm standing on the shoulders of giants because you know, I was so lucky to do a PhD with Sydney Decker and Drew Rea at Griffith, and then they've just been able to introduce me to all these amazing people around the world, and I've just read and tried to contribute and having a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, awesome, good. I like it. We'll probably naturally come on to the podcast anyway, and some of the work you've done. But why don't you, for anyone that doesn't know you, why don't you just give us a bit of an introduction into yourself?
So safety is really the only thing I've thought about in a professional sense or in my adult life. You know, I since I was 17, 18 and first went to university, I studied safety and psychology, and then I got a graduate safety position in the railways and worked my way through to senior management positions, went into construction, went into safety director role in oil and gas business. And that's kind of all I'd done in my whole career. And I just felt a bit stale. I felt, you know, after 10 or 12 years that I felt that we weren't really moving as a profession. I felt that I couldn't put my finger on the value that we were adding to companies. And so then I just started looking outside my day-to-day work and starting to read and starting to connect with people, and figured that I actually wanted to try to help more people and more organizations. So the way to do that was to do a PhD and then start a consulting business and try to just broaden myself out for sort of the second half of my career. And so that's where we are now.
I like that you kind of that resonates, to be honest, quite a lot with pretty much everyone that's got started a podcast, funny enough. So my story is pretty much the same. I was a safety professional for a few years and then was like, I don't feel like we're really having much impact. And my kind of story is, I always say that I was quite naive when I started this podcast, and I was a bit like, oh, there's nobody talking about this new way to look at safety. It's just my unique view. And I started the podcast, read a couple of books, was like, shit, actually quite a lot of people are talking like this. I haven't got the monopoly, which is bad, but it was amazing. And then Sam Goodman is pretty much the same. We had him on the podcast, and he was saying, well, that, like, you know, he called himself a recovering safety professional, which I liked as well. It seems to me like this natural journey, I think, like that everyone goes through. You become, and maybe if you want to go down that safety 1, safety 2 route, maybe that would be, to be honest, probably a podcast in itself. But like, it seems that everyone goes through this kind of, just to use that phrase, safety 1 journey, hits this kind of point and then goes, there's got to be something else to this. I wonder whether it's natural or not. I don't know.
Oh, look, I think you start a safety role or a safety career, and I was definitely quite naive, and you think there's a relatively simple formula. You train people and write a bunch of processes and check people follow them and investigate things that go wrong. And, you know, you can happily cruise through year after year and not upset too many people in your business, and, you know, maybe not add a whole lot to the business either, but you can kind of do that. And I think then you just hit this point where you know, ask those questions. You get to a point in your career. It might be for some 3 years, it might be 5. For me, it took me about 10. And you just go, is this what I'm going to do for the next 30 years? You know, the same year of experience 30 more times. And, you know, I'd started doing stuff differently in my business, not really knowing about what was out there. I was ignorant of what was going on outside my organization and the echo chamber of industry. And then when Sydney Decker came to Australia in 2012, I sort of got involved, sort of read his work, and then I just gave him a call and said, "Oh, this stuff you're talking about, I think we've been doing a lot of it for the last couple of years. Do you want to come and check out what we're doing?" And that was where it really all started for me in terms of connecting with the broader community.
Oh wow, awesome! So you just dropped Sydney a line. It was like, "Sup, Sid?" and then come and have a look at what we're doing, and that was it. I like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is 2011 or so, and he was connecting with Australian businesses because he was he'd started the Safety Science Innovation Lab at Griffith and started a program here and was looking for industry kind of partners and funds. So he was very receptive to kind of understanding what the state of play was in regards to safety in Australia. So, and he always has been. I mean, Sydney's he's always been great. I mean, people can email him and call him, and he'll do his best to get in touch with anyone.
Well, this is an off the cuff question actually, but what is it about Australia? All the good stuff in safety does seem to be coming from Australia. And I mean, even if you look at, like, I know New Zealand's not Australia, but that kind of continent, I suspect, like, they're even dealing with COVID better as well. Like, what is it about those kind of areas that just seem to get this like more people focused approach?
Look, I think the countries are younger. I mean, our countries have only got 200 years of history, so and we're much smaller populations. I mean, there's 25 or 30 million people in Australia, and it's the size of the US in terms of geography. So we're not living that close together. So probably slows the COVID transmission down a little bit. And we're also last to get certain things, but it helps us be, maybe a little bit more dynamic. It helps individuals have bigger voices because there's less total voices in the community. So, the population's small enough in Australia with 5 or 6 people who are sort of, trying to think and help and promote critical ways of thinking about safety and new ways of thinking about safety. Their voices are able to be heard.
I like that. I think that's quite sensible, actually. I think that's I never thought of it like that. That Australia is the size. I went there for my honeymoon. First time I've ever been. Went to Australia for my honeymoon. We did a cruise of the. I always forget what coast it is. The coast that Sydney. Sydney's on.
The East Coast. Yeah.
East Coast. That's it. Where the coral reef is and all that. So we did a cruise along there. But I never thought of it like that. Jesus, it's the same size of America, but like nowhere near the population. That is nuts. I remember sitting in. Go on. Oh, sorry. I remember. We sat, and I don't know if you've ever been on a cruise, but you go on a cruise, you have those horrible orange, like they look like lifeboats, but they're just shuttles that take you from the ship to the land. If they can't get close enough, they're horrible. It's like a submarine on top. It's disgusting. You're sweaty and horrible. Oh, it's horrible. Anyway, when I was sitting there, you're packed. You're in like sardines, and I was talking to an Australian family. And me and my wife were like naively surprised because there was loads of Australian people on this cruise. And we were like, if you live in Australia, why are you coming on a cruise of the South Coast or the East Coast, whatever it was? And it was then that we started to realise, Jesus, this place is actually huge. Like we were really like geographically naive.
Yeah, it is a big country, and I mean, I've never been on one of those cruises, and it might be something that I actually never get to go on, depending on whether those sorts of things ever bounce back.
True, we were lucky. We went about, it must have been over a year ago now, but very, very, very lucky to have done that before this happened. But anyway, I'm digressing. I do that a lot. My apologies. You know what? I'm quite intrigued as to kind of how that kind of, so now you're a part-time researcher, like you say, and that's, how did that kind of come about? Was that natural, or is in that process of you wanted to deliver more, or was there one specific point that went, hey, I'm going to do this, or one paper or something like that?
I'd sort of decided that I wanted to start a consulting business. I thought there was an opportunity to provide better external support to companies. And so that was sort of the start of my thinking about that. And I thought, well, if you're going to do that, then you have to at least be confident in your own expertise. So I'd already done maybe 12 or 13 years as a safety director, as a head of safety. And I was feeling like if I was just going to keep doing that, I'd just go to a new company and do the same thing for 5 years, and then go to the next company and do the same thing for 5 years. And I just didn't feel like that was going to inspire me for the rest of my career. So the two things sort of went together: going and doing the PhD, just for my own chance to learn and make sure I kind of understood the safety science landscape, and then sort of come out of that by starting this and try to put some of those evidence-based practices into services to to support companies. So the two went together very much so to sort of do that career transition.
How was that transition, becoming like was it like a new skill to be a researcher? How different is it?
I mean, I'd always done a lot of study. Like I'd done a couple of master's degrees and an undergraduate degree, and so I'd probably spent 10 years of study in the previous 15 of part-time study and things like that. So the study wasn't too bad, and I was just so motivated, about reading all this stuff that really smart people had kind of done and written, and getting the opportunity to design my own questions that I was interested in, and to then go and get the data. And that was an amazing experience, just to sort of be a researcher and have blank pieces of paper in front of you and be just really listening and observing to what people were saying and doing, and trying to make sense of it. Like I actually found that that part of the process really really rewarding, really exciting, really great. Lots of surprises. Like I had these amazing epiphanies on the way through my research of just okay, so that's the way that this works. Just by getting that opportunity to just really think about it.
I like that. That's interesting. Which actually brings us on quite nicely to the paper that you've done, which I think we'll get into like proper heavy. And I'll hold my hands up. I don't read research papers. I haven't got that cognitive capacity or that attention span like to do it. But which is why I absolutely love your podcast with Drew, The Safety of Work, because you do that for me. You read it and then you discuss it, and I'm just like, perfect. Thank you very much. Now I don't need to sit down and read this. Thank you. So I hold my hands up. This is the way I learn, by talking and listening. But I'd love to get into it, because I think so your paper is called Benefactor or Burden. So it's from how I kind of interpret it, it's how we as a safety professional kind of see ourselves, which is what you kind of entitled the podcast episode where you discussed it. But for me, I think that it adds that kind of that more academic way of what we're talking about in the podcast. We call it Rebranding Safety for a reason, as I genuinely felt like I need to rebrand how I see myself and how other people see me. Like I hated how, I played rugby. So, if I didn't tackle somebody, it was like, oh, did you not tackle them because you risk assessed it? It was too high risk, or some crap, joke like that. And so, I hated it. And I was like, this is not what safety is. So like, what started that paper? Why did you kind of do that? And then we'll get into it from there.
Okay, so let me give a short history of kind of like the start of that paper. So when I started talking to Sydney we were talking a lot about safety differently and safety two, and resilience engineering was talking a lot about safety in organizations and managers and workers and that, and it was almost silent on the safety profession. And so I said to Sid, I said, like, what's your view on the safety professional or the profession? What does this all mean? And his kind of comment was, well, I think the profession's kind of an irrelevant nuisance. Like if managers are doing what managers do, and technical people do what technical people do, and workers, are trusted and supported and do what they do, then you don't need a safety profession. And I'm like, oh, come on. Well, I've just done 15 years of my career as a safety professional. And I'm going, I said, maybe, but, maybe also this is a massive resource for organizations that they've already got in place. And what if we could find a way to that resource for kind of good rather than evil? And so the good rather than evil was kind of the benefactor or burden piece, kind of like, and so I'd gone and done a literature review where I sort of reviewed about 100 research papers that have been written on the safety profession in the last 30 years. And we knew a lot about the profession. We kind of knew who they were. We knew what education they had. We knew what tasks and activities they did in their role, but we kind of didn't know what the safety profession thought or believed. So the starting point to me was going, well, I'm interested in what safety professionals do, but I'm interested in knowing, do they do that because that's what they believe, or do they do that because the sort of institutional forces are so great in their organization that regardless of what they believe, that's the work they're going to be doing. So that was kind of my social theory lens of this, is how much is agency and how much is structure. So I figured that when I started my PhD, what I really needed to do was understand what safety professionals believed, about safety and about their role and about themselves. So that was kind of that research paper that you talk about there, Benefactor or Burden, exploring the professional identity of safety professionals, where I asked a group of safety professionals individually in interviews just 4 questions. I just said, tell me about your safety background. Tell me how you think organizations should best manage safety. Tell me about what you think your role is as a safety professional, and tell me how you measure the success or effectiveness of your performance of your role. And that was it, 4 questions, and people talked at me for an hour and a half.
Yeah, I was going to say, they're like big questions. They're big questions.
Yeah. And they were designed to be big, like if you ask people, what's my safety background, and people would say, what do you mean? It's like, well, just wherever you want to start. So some people said, I went to university, or some people said I was involved in an accident, or some people said, my father, did this in his career and that motivated me to do this. And it was just trying to understand kind of the journey into the profession and through the profession, and then try to make sense of how much of that journey and how the person thinks about safety kind of relates to how they see their role, and what they see as important and success, and then what these kind of belief archetypes and narratives are that the safety profession hold. And that's kind of all within that paper, just all the tensions and trade-offs and complexities associated with kind of the safety role in organizations.
It's interesting because like how you kind of that conversation you had with Sydney is fascinating, because I've always kind of said, that the aim of our role should surely be that we make ourselves redundant. Like, surely we need to get to a point where the businesses just do safety. Like, we all talk about safety just being an integral part of the business, something that we just kind of do inherently in our operations. We just kind of think about the risk. And, when we're teaching people to do risk assessments, we're trying to get them to be more mindful of it and kind of do it as they do that risk assessment, move away from the risk assessment being like a written formal process to being more of a thought process, is how I've always tried to train people to do it. Which then it gets to a point where, well, essentially, my dream is that I don't have to work anymore, obviously, and then they just do it, and that's interesting. Maybe Sydney didn't really go that far, but it's interesting that you kind of challenge that to say, well, hang on a minute, no, there's a massive resource of like unique way of thinking that the businesses can actually use here. But what did you so what was the kind of overarching kind of, I don't understand if people can get this from listening to your podcast, but like, what did you take away from it? What you thought personally that people perceive themselves as a profession? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do. And before I answer that, maybe I can give a perspective on your comment there about doing yourself out of a job. I think it's one of those cliches that sounds good, but I don't think I believe that anymore. I just think that, the world is so dynamic and changing. And, if you go back to like Charles Perrow's work or Jens Rasmussen's work or David Woods' work, they'll just say that, and even Sid's later stuff, I know the book manuscript that he's just submitting at the moment on neoliberalism and capitalism, you just know that the push for the dollar, you need to have another force in your company that's pushing for safety. Because the pressures are always going to be there in organizations. So that's why I feel like there's always this role for someone who's looking at the organization solely through the lens of safety, that to contribute. That's my hope. Doesn't need to be necessarily a big group, but I'm not sure it would be smart for an organization to claim victory over safety and get rid of their safety department.
No, I like the way
in terms of the takeaways, look, I left thinking it was funny. I sort of not set up, you know, the questions that I asked the participants, they were hard questions. And even today I'd find those tough to answer, you know, and I asked those of participants a couple of years ago, and I actually don't know how I'd answer some of those questions. And what I sort of found was that, you know, the profession is so diverse, the ways of thinking are so diverse, and there's so many tensions and trade-offs and paradoxes in the role. And I sort of lay out about 8 or 9 of these paradoxes. And by that, I mean, for your listeners, you know, a paradox is something that, you know, two things that are seemingly in opposition, but both are true. And so something like a safety person saying, well, leaders should be accountable for safety and leaders should make decisions about safety, unless the decision they make is not what I think is safe or not. And then it's my job to, you know, change the decision that they've made. Yeah. Or there's all these it's this unless it's this in the role. And I find that makes it really, really hard. It makes it hard for professionals it makes it easy for professionals to get it wrong, and makes it hard for organizations to understand the role and how best to support it. So even one of the conclusions of that paper was just actually, you know, thinking in your organization about what your role is and talking to other stakeholders about, hey, this is my role, and in this situation, this is the way I perform it. But in this situation, please understand that, you know, this is the way I perform it, and this is the reason. And I just don't. Well, I never had those discussions with my organisations, and you know, I think that's why often the safety professional, you know, falls off the same page as their management.
I like that. So that you would kind of say that would be one takeaway for anyone to just kind of start having those conversations, and kind of explain, this is how I've seen myself potentially dealing with this type of situation and that type of situation, and then looking for how the business kind of perceive those situations as well, and what they think. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think asking professionals, you know, how many times have you had conversations with your management and say, look, if I see something that, you know, is unsafe in the business, you know, how do you want me to approach that? You know, who do you want me to, who do you want me to go to first? And I've done that with organizations, which has been really empowering to do it and say, hey, you know how we discussed when I said I saw something I wasn't going to like, or even like getting clear with the organization about auditing processes. And, you know, we say, oh, we really want to find out bad news, but then, you know, you put a red mark on an audit and throw it on a board table of a company about a safety issue and, you know, see how that conversation goes. So I just think all these things make it really, really hard for the safety profession. I say quite a bit that I think the safety profession is the toughest job to do in a business, full stop. Absolutely. It's the only role. It has to know everything that's going on from the boardroom out into the field. It's actually probably the only functional role that actually needs to know how work is actually performed. Most other people don't really need to know that. It needs to know what's going on in HR and IT and project management and engineering and procurement, supply chain, and you know, it needs to interface with all those business processes. And so, you know, that's why I think you see a lot of people frustrated with the profession, because they say, oh, this person's good at the paperwork, but they're not good in the field, or, you know, this person's, you know, good at this, but not good at that. I think it's because the profession has to be so good at pretty much everything.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, we kind of have to be like, I remember doing a local school. They had like a careers day, and I saw it on Facebook, and I was like, hey, I'll come along and talk about safety as a career. Like, I think it's a great career. I love my job. And I mean, I was sitting in a room, and I said to the kids, what do you think about safety? And it was all kind of, well, my dad says that it stopped him doing what he says he does. And I went to this caravan, and they had a sign saying the shower was slippery. No shit. Do you know what I mean? And I just thought, wow, it's fascinating that young kids have got this perception of health and safety kind of gone mad. But then, and I remember saying in there, like, do you know what it actually is in one day, you're a lawyer, you're an engineer, you're a psychologist, you're a sociologist, you're a trainer, you're a policy writer, you're so many things. And it's the only job in the business where you get your fingers in every single pie. Like, you have to know how finance operate, how the board operates, how operations operate, how all of these kind of aspects of the business, which inherently makes it unbelievably complex.
And it does. And that's why, I think going back to the conversation about, having lots and lots of open conversations with your organization about what your role is and demystifying it for your organization and talking about different situations that make your role hard and interactions that make your role hard. And, I think that would be the place that I'd encourage people to start. If I ever went back inside an organization, that's all I'd be doing, is just talking a lot about, this is how it's done. What do you think? Are we on the same page? How can we make it work? How can we agree what the most important things for me to be doing are? Can we all just have a good conversation that all this box ticking stuff is not as useful for me as being out, in the field or, in a project meeting or something like that, helping make decisions or monitoring what's going on. I just think we kind of don't do that. We just kind of like get either, we don't think we need to do that, I suppose, for some people, or others just have a sort of a learned helplessness or a victim mentality where they just go, that's what it is, and there's nothing I can do to change it.
It's interesting because I know you've been on a couple of Ron Gantz calls over the coronavirus period. These amazing calls that Ron's been doing, which is just like, I tell you what, I've learned more on Ron Gantz calls than I have in 8 years of being a professional. So shout out to Ron Gantz. And there's, what's it called, a PDSC, I think calls. Anyway, they're amazing. And I think you've been, is it PDSC? Or maybe I've got
physical distancing, something. I don't know.
Yeah. I'd have just called them COVID calls because I'm much more simple-minded than Ron is. He's far too intelligent for me. But it's interesting because we had one, was it yesterday? We were talking about teaching safety. It was interesting. We started a conversation about how safety professionals train non-safety professionals. But then we found out that actually that wasn't the intent of the conversation. The intent of the conversation was to talk about how we as safety professionals are taught safety. So the qualifications, the degrees that we have. And this then opened up a fascinating conversation where we were talking about all the different degrees. There was a gentleman on there, I know his first name was Mike, but I don't know his second name, who I think was a lecturer in a university who taught kind of resilience and human engineering. I can't remember.
It might be Mike Beam. I think he's in Mike Beam.
Cool. I'm going to add that onto a post-it note then, because I love how he was kind of talking about it. But we were talking, and we ended up coming onto the same thing as what we're talking about. And I said that one of the problems I think with the qualifications, especially in the UK, is the qualifications are designed around how people perceive the safety profession. So it's very traditional, kind of technical engineering based. So we go through these qualifications. So for example, I've just done my level 6 diploma, just finished it, finally got my ass around to actually doing it, done it. And it's all like, it's very generalist. So I'm going through that and I'm talking about, key safety critical components in electrical safety and scaffolding and fire, etc., etc., etc. And I'm reading this was like the last book of essentially 3 books. And I'm sitting there thinking, how is it right that me, as a person who's never been, I trained as an electrician in college, but that aside, never been a scaffolder, for example, never been an engineer, never been anything, has to learn all these safety critical components, and then go into work and tell somebody who's been doing engineering for 20, 30 years, and say, well, sorry, you're wrong, because I read in a book that you're supposed to do it like this. And then we wonder why they get peed off. Do you think that, it's interesting, it would have been great to have you on that call actually, but do you think that there is a fundamental problem in how the rest of the industry perceive our roles? It's not just how we perceive our roles, but like how we're perceived by everybody else.
Yeah, definitely. And those calls are great. They're either at 7 o'clock in the morning or midnight for me.
Oh, really?
Those calls. Yeah.
That's why you're not on them. And that's fair.
Yeah. So you either get me really, really tired, or after a couple of beers. That's kind of the only way I'm joining those calls.
After a couple of beers would be great, I think.
Yeah. So look, I think my take on this that I kind of wrote was, I think there was a really big study done in the early 2000s. Andrew Hale and Frank Goulderman and others, they went and surveyed a whole heap of safety professionals, and it got picked up through all of the professional associations. I think a total of 12 countries ended up doing it. Nearly 9,000 responses from health and safety professionals through about 2004 to 2007. And they said sort of like something like 60% of people spent 60% of the time all over the world doing the same sorts of things. And it was like safety training, writing safety procedures, doing safety audits, doing safety incident investigations, and these types of things. And so I think what happened then is people went, oh, beauty. Okay, we know what these people do. So educational institutions do what they do, which is go, well, how do we train people to be able to do that well? And they go, okay, they're doing all these risk assessments and all these procedures, so they need to understand physical hazards in the workplace and to support that to happen. So, then we started seeing all of these capability frameworks and then these accreditation boards and all pop up. And I just don't think anyone stepped back and gone, what should the safety profession actually be doing and how do we train for that? And I think that's the big gap at the moment. So, in that paper that you mentioned before, there's I saw two quite distinct sets of beliefs from professionals. And it came down to pretty much that first question I asked, which is what's your safety background and how'd you get into it? And basically the people who went to uni and then went into safety, like me, believed that they were the true professionals, believed that safety was a lot about top-down direction and systems and processes. And then the people who'd been firefighters or in the military or pilots or something, and then ended up coming into safety after, operating in a high hazard thing. First of all, they rarely even wanted to call themselves safety professionals. They were in a safety job, but they definitely didn't identify as a safety professional. And they sort of talked a lot about bottom-up creation of safety and people and complexity and, more about culture and leadership and some of those types of things, and said, but it was interesting that both groups of people pointed the finger at the other as not being very effective, and I think that's, so we've got a problem, because I believe that the profession should have a qualification framework. I don't believe we've got the qualification framework right.
Yeah, I think, I would agree. And I would probably, I remember you describing those kind of the two backgrounds of safety in your podcast when you talked about it with Drew. And I was sitting there thinking, I don't feel like personally my background fits with either of them. It probably fits with the latter, the people that have done something else before. I essentially was like a teenage layabout that wanted to work in theatre or be a journalist. I trained as an electrician so I could be a lighting engineer in theatre. Did that during a recession. That never worked out, and then just took a job in safety. There's an extremely long story. I've been a chef, warehouse, everything. I've done a lot, and took a job in safety, and was that traditional safety one kind of audits kind of person for a long time. And then I don't like this. Hit the point, but I think everybody gets to this point who, if they're of the mindset of me, and they're like, I don't want to be this police officer anymore. And I know that came up in your research as well, but I think that there's a benefit to having both of those routes, like people that have done something else before, people that started this as their first career or went to university. And then, it reminds me of like Matthew Syed's work around in his book, and I know he probably got it from somebody else, but I'm new to all this, but cognitive diversity, those different backgrounds bring different ways of thinking. Where I think we fail, which I think is what you alluded to, is that we fail to just talk to each other in a calm, professional manner and acknowledge that somebody from uni can bring a different way of looking at things, or somebody from the military, for example, can bring another completely different way of looking at things. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, like we said, the complexity of the safety professional role is if you've got a team, you just want, as much diversity as you can get on that team. So if I was building my ideal team, I'd have exactly like you just described. I'd have, some people, who had come through university pathways, some people who'd come off tools, some people who'd come from all different backgrounds, and spend time helping people to sort of value and appreciate and have empathy for that kind of difference and diversity. And that's, I think, how you'd make a safety team the most effective. because you need it. And I suppose, if you've come out of the workforce into a safety role, then I think you'll be more effective if you take the time to do some reading and explore some of the ideas that are shaping the roles and the functions in the organization. And equally, if you've done a lot of study and haven't done a lot of frontline work yourself, spend as much time in the field as you possibly can, just looking at work and talking to people who do that sort of work and trying to walk in their shoes and understand what life's like for them. And round yourself out that way. I think I might have said in the podcast, and I say it because I really like the idea that I think, safety university degrees should have a semester where the students have to take the semester off and go get a job as a labourer or a cleaner in a hospital or a garbage truck driver or any other job, and look back at safety and go, what's it like to actually do the work? Experience the safety processes and the challenges of doing work. And that's just one way of saying I think we've got to round out the experiences and the knowledge that the professionals have.
Yeah, you did say that in a podcast. I remember thinking that's spot on. I remember you listen to that. I remember exactly where I was. I was walking my dog just down the road from my house. I remember thinking, yeah, that's it. That is spot on. I think, and from my experience, when I remember in my first role, when I started getting more into the work, I started building relationships with machine, because I come from a manufacturing background. So getting a relationship with the machine operators and understanding their challenges, their pressures, I started to see so much more payback for me. We just having a good relationship with them. Mainly I was getting invited on the golf days out, which was a great start. But secondly, they were coming to me when they had problems and concerns just because we started building up that relationship. But I remember the clear kind of benefit from it. It was one of the challenges we had when I started was getting safety observations. Don't shoot me. I know there's a view on those safety observations, but we that was what we wanted to do, right? That's what we needed to do, but we couldn't get them, and there was a sense that what we were observing was not reality, which I think we all probably know. It's the supervised behaviours versus the unsupervised behaviours. So we kind of had that sense, and this was all coming from my manager at the time. And he was saying, James, I've just come up into this, the team leader type role. And he was like, this is what I want you to get done. Like, I want more observations and I want good observations. I couldn't tell you where I got the idea from. I may have dreamt it, I might have read it, but I just thought, I'm not going to go to the operational team and say I want to do a safety observation. I'm going to say I want to volunteer my time in the hours that I work to pack at the end of the machine or to help do whatever I can. God, within months we were getting loads and loads of requests. Every time that we had this one set of orders, which was like just really horrible, really fast paced, and you always had like 5 or 6 people on the end of the machine. Every time we had that order, there was hey, do you want to do a safety observation? Because it wasn't a safety observation anymore. It was a second pair of hands. Obviously, there was a difficult part when I had to remember everything that was going on because I couldn't write it down because I was actually working, which was a challenge in itself. But we were doing that observation and they didn't feel like they were being observed. They felt like they were getting an extra pair of hands, which for me, I just thought was like, wow, game changer.
Yeah, love that approach. And I think the takeout is just, you have to, I say it a little bit. I think, the quote that, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so, just don't even think about starting to try to tell people, how you want them to think or what you want them to do until you've got a relationship with them. And the hard part for a safety professional is, there's no shortcut to that. That takes time, like you've described. And the number of different stakeholders that the safety professional has means that it's just got to spend a lot of time in the field and a lot of time talking to people. And so I say to safety professionals is like, if you don't have 50, 60, 70% of your week just as white space for you to do that, for you to just have coffees with the managers, go out in the field, follow a hunch, see a weak signal, go collect some information about it, make some random phone calls around your business, you're just never going to be in a position that when you really need to actually get some support in your company, that it's there ready to go. And I know that's a hard thing to do because companies really want to see tasks being delivered. And one of the participants in the research that you talk about said to me is, look, the most important part of my job is the 20 or 30 conversations that I have every week that sort of just keeps me informed and keeps the organization kind of the glue that holds the organization together. But no one cares about that. No one sees it. No one measures it. All they care about is if my Wednesday report's late. And I always kind of remember that, to go that actually, no, this is a social role in organizations, and this is a role that the company has to value the social component, and make sure that their safety people are spending more than 50% of their time on that.
Yeah, I love that. I think that is, I can resonate with that comment, definitely. I think, I remember, we got invited to the golf days at this manufacturing meet, and I genuinely found out, got so much more. It wasn't a golf day. Well, it was, we were playing golf, but it was a feedback loop, essentially, because we were going on this golf day. I was finding out so much more about how people felt about our safety systems when we were playing golf, when we were having breakfast before golf, when we were having beers at the end. They were all like, "Oh, James, that new risk assessment you put out, the right pain in the ass." And I'm like, well, get involved in it and let's change it, let's make it better. And I just think that, like, now, that I was lucky, all of that stuff was just luck that I come across that. But now I'm so grateful that we went through that, because you're right. I think as much as we had Andrew Sharman on the podcast, I'll reserve my opinion of him, but that aside, it was, he says in his books, it's safety is a social exercise. And I resonate with that totally.
Yeah, and like before I left my last job, I had to. I actually had to go to decaffeinated coffee, because I must have been having 10 or 12 coffee meetings every single day, and I turned into an insomniac. I couldn't sleep because it was just like, I'll see if this manager's free, and I'll see if this project manager's free, and I'll go find this operations manager, or this contract manager or something, and find out what's going on in their department. What are their challenges? What's happening? Are they seeing anything in the business that I'm not seeing? And that was pretty much how I spent. I mean, I had the time to build a good team around me, which meant I didn't have to do too much of the work anymore. And that's just basically how I spent all my time. And it was probably the most valuable, the biggest contribution I was making to any organization in my whole career. And I think we also said, just on that social piece, we wrote a quote that gets cited a little bit, where we just said that safety is never a standard to be achieved. Safety is always a point of consensus amongst stakeholders.
I like that. Yeah, that is good.
So safety is always about, what does the manager think? What does the technical expert think? What does the work?
That is good, and I think, I think that's so true. Were the kind of people that you surveyed, was it all in one country? Were they spread out across the world? And if they were spread out, was there a difference in how people, like, geographically?
Yeah, so no, there wasn't. So it was a case study within a single organization. So I interviewed people in the same organization, and the reason that the research design was like that, there's downsides to that, but one of the things was I was looking for the differences in beliefs about safety and beliefs about the role. And so if I had a whole lot of people from a whole different lot of companies, I kind of wouldn't been able to know if those differences were because of how they thought or because of the company that they were working in. Yeah. So that was just one of the things. And so that research, which, I haven't had the time or priority to follow up on, was to actually then go and say, well, actually, now that we've got these different ways of thinking, what we really need to do is test this across a much bigger sample. But that was the main thing for me, was just to control for knowing whether it was actually genuinely the belief of the person or whether it was just a feature of them playing out what their organization expected of them. So, that was the reason that was all one company.
Yeah. But I can kind of understand that, to be honest, that's something that I suspect that's the skill of a researcher, is to be able to preempt the potential problem with going wider. I'd have just been like, well, why are we going one company? We need to go around the world, and I'd have never thought of that. So that's a very valid point.
Yeah, and exactly right. And that's why, if you're ever going to go do a PhD, just get an amazing couple of supervisors. And it'd be no secret to anyone who listens to the podcast how amazing Drew Rea is at understanding research and how to get at questions and what's good and what's not. So that was all his guidance, because this was very early in my research career. So I was just soaking it all in.
Yeah, the guy is impressive. Even and what I think he's very good at, Drew, is I've been messaging him as much as I'm messaging you. So if you could drop a line and get him to come on the podcast, that'd be great. But I love the way he describes and explains research. Like he seems to do that pretty much in every episode. It's like right, just to explain what this type of research means. And for me, as someone who is like a complete newbie to that stuff and kind of really just inept to it to a point, that's a real game changer. It really helps people like me, definitely.
And I think we don't realize so much that we're all in our roles researching every day. You know, we're forming hypothesis and ideas about the way our company's functioning, and then we're going out and gathering data to try to kind of like confirm that or support that. And if you know how to do that well, you know, you can, if you know when, you know, it might be useful to go and ask 15 managers the same 3 questions. And then you can come back to your company and say, well, actually, we might have a problem here because 10 out of 15 managers have, you know, all have the belief that the organization values production over safety. So let's talk about goal conflict in our business. And so I think the safety profession can be a lot more effective by having some of those basic research skills, because we're doing it every day. I just don't think we're doing it very well.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think I've never been taught stuff like that ever. And I think it reminds me of, I think it's Todd that says the power's in the question, not in the answer. I might be wrong, but I'm sure it's Todd that said that. But I remember hearing that. I'm thinking, oh, Jesus, yeah. But then I'm like, then that opens up this whole kind of worms of like, well, how do you pick the right question? You know, what is the right question? And then what answer am I trying to get? And it's just like, oh, if you get a bit like lost in it, how do you think someone like me, especially, could develop that skill? Is there a specific way, book to read or a course to go on, or is it just kind of trial and error, or all of the above?
Look, I think you could listen to our podcast if you want to talk about some questions. Just a shameless kind of plug in there, but no,
it's not. I think no shame in it, mate. That's what you got to do. You got to plug your work.
Got to do that. Yeah. I think there's a So I know that you mentioned Todd. He's got a book, Better Questions, which is really good. I think it was Edgar Schein who wrote Humble Inquiry, which is another amazing book. And there's great people like Daniel Hamadal and others who are just really good at asking questions and getting people to kind of tell them about their world and their reality. And I think there's definitely books you can read to just learn how to ask good questions. But I think that's but they're pretty simple. Like I don't know if you can ask a bad question.
Okay.
I think the message for the safety profession is kind of that message that says you got 2 ears and 1 mouth. So make sure you ask 2 questions for every kind of statement that you make. So
classic.
I kind of just say, I think just start asking questions would be a good start.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that's something that profession could definitely benefit from. Like just stop preaching a little bit and stop, reckoning the answer to everything, and just start trying to talk to people and be social, like what we kind of just said.
Yeah,
I was listening to one of your episodes this morning, because you're a regular in my ear, or even though I think it was yourself that said about cautionary tales, the doing podcast. Oh my God, what a podcast that is! Like, I'm in love with it. I think I've finished it now. I think there's not that many episodes on it, but I'm sure the last episode I listened to, he said this is the last in the series, and I nearly cried. Like, it's so good. So thank you very much for that shout out. That was amazing. And just quickly on that, like what is good about it, and I'd be interested to get your opinion, but what is good about it is we're talking about safety, but we're not talking about safety. Like, we're talking about all the systems and stuff that we talk about in safety or in risk and resilience, but he's not talking about safety. He's talking about the Grammys or kind of Adolf Hitler or something in the war, and you're just like, it's like people are learning about what we're talking about in safety. And it's completely, essentially, he's rebranded safety without having doing it. That's just a bit annoying to me, because that's what I was trying to do.
Yeah, and because I think he's just, not labeling it safety. He's just talking about kind of like, the difference between success and failure.
Yeah.
And what that looks like when you're trying to achieve an outcome and you make a mess of it. He's an amazing narrator and an amazing researcher, amazing journalist, Tim Harford. So I'd recommend that to anyone.
Yeah, he is great. I mean, and to be honest, like I say, I'm new to all of this, and I hadn't really heard of him until that podcast. And now I'm like, his books are on my wish list and everything. Like, great guy. But anyway, I digress. The point I was going to make is something that you I think it was yourself. It could have been Drew. They mentioned on an episode I was listening to this morning. I can't remember what it's called, but there was a comment you said in there. I'm sure one of you said that we need to be focusing more on qualitative. And I might have said that wrong, but qualitative kind of research and not quantitative research, which kind of piqued my interest because recently interviewed Dom Cooper, and he's very prominent in this safety 1, safety 2 argument. And when we interviewed him, he said actually the complete opposite. He was like, for the safety 2 world, there's no quantitative evidence that this stuff actually works and all this. And I don't want to get into a safety 1, safety 2 argument, but from your kind of point of view, especially, I think it's unique because you've gone from, one of us as a safety professional to now being like, in this research world. It's like, it'd be really interesting if you could maybe just explain the two differences and why potentially qualitative is in your opinion a bit better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, look, because I think it comes down to what you're trying to learn, what research method is appropriate. So if you want to know what people think, surveys are fine. If you want to sort of describe how many people do this and how many people do that, or what people's perceptions are, like surveys are all great for that. And you can count that and you can score that. And we still do that. I mean, I'm doing some big projects with companies where we're using survey tools to ask people what they think. But I think what we'd say is they're probably the least interesting questions. We want to know questions that start with like, how does something happen and why does something happen? And, what are the deep contextual factors around work? So if you want to look at what people do and understand why they do it, you've really actually got to use some more deep qualitative message. You've got to observe people working. So I know that at the lab, we've done some projects with field researchers just doing exactly like what you described you used to do, which is just do the job with people and just take field observation notes and do that for weeks and weeks and weeks under different conditions, under different experimental conditions, and learn that way. Or deep interviews where you just get a chance to have this type of conversation that you and I are having, that we can deepen our kind of our thinking process and understanding through it. So I think some of the things that we're interested in complex systems and in safety, I think the only way to describe it is to do qualitative research, or to actually understand it is to do qualitative research.
And it's interesting because, and I'm going to let you go in a second. I'm conscious we're coming up to about an hour, and you've probably got an actual life to get to, other than talking to some weird young safety professional over in England.
Hey, this is podcast number 5 for the week, and only 2 of them were my own.
Oh, really? Oh, awesome. Honestly, mate, you've taken a kind of world by storm. It's amazing to see, and it's great because it's such a clever podcast, and it's so simple. But I've been on loads of Ron's calls, loads of those calls, and nearly every call somebody says, "Oh, I was listening to the Safety of Work podcast the other day," and then first, like the monkey brain in me at first goes, "Oh, you bastards," and then the other side of brain goes, "Oh no, it's actually such a good podcast. It's so clever." Like, and actually, I'm going to forget my other question and stick on this. Like, what made you kind of start that podcast? Was it just a general chit chat over a beer with you and Drew, and was like, "Hey, do you think we should do a podcast?" Because I know Drew had Disaster Cast before this, or.
Yeah, and look, the back catalogue of Disaster Cast is amazing. It's I don't think Drew or Mind is saying it might not quite be cautionary tales, but it's an amazingly well researched set of episodes, 50 or 60 episodes back there. So look, this might be a long sort of story, but I'll try not to be too long. So as part of my research, like I said, because I was doing a lot of research within the company I was the head of safety of, but I was actually being a participant observer, and that's a legitimate research method where I was taking field notes, but I was also sort of participating in my role, but doing reflections every day and interviewing people, observing people, and just trying to understand the system. It's like when Jane Goodall wanted to understand what apes do, she went and just lived amongst the apes for a few years, to see how they interacted. So, so like that's a legitimate kind of ethnographic research method that I was sort of following there. And I came back to Drew one day and sat in his office after a 4-hour safety meeting that I was in and said, Drew, look, we spent 4 hours talking about safety and, debating, discussing, high-fiving, patting each other on the back. And we didn't actually have a single conversation about a specific risk that was facing the workforce. We didn't make a single decision that was going to do anything to improve safety within the organization. And we had, all these managers sitting around for 4 hours. And so that's when we actually just started developing that, trying to understand why that would be the case. And we wrote that paper, Safety Work versus the Safety of Work. And so then I went on from that and sort of I'd done 7 months of interviewing safety professionals and observing their work and asking them, this is again like the qualitative research method. I sat down with something like 80 interviews with safety professionals, asked them, tell me about a task you're currently doing in your job. Just pick anything. I don't care what it is. An investigation, a report, a management plan, just pick anything. And now let's talk about that. Why you're doing it. Why is it important that you do it now? What are you trying to achieve as an outcome? How are you approaching it? What does success look like? And never once in those 70, 80 interviews did anyone say, the reason that I'm doing this is because in this situation, the research or the safety science is clear that the best approach that we can take as an organization is to do this. It never came up. There was zero kind of evidence-based narrative amongst the profession. So this was kind of that thing where Drew and I were like, well, we criticize that, but we can't just keep telling people to read academic papers. Like I think even you've said already, I don't like, I'll maybe read the paper one day. So you're the perfect listener for us, which is someone who's got a bit of an interest, but is not going to pick up an academic paper. And we just said, Drew and I were just like, well, if you're part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And so we thought there was a gap, or there was an opportunity to provide a resource that was trying to translate what's in the safety science literature into practice for the professionals, and help them just get a greater appreciation for what research is and how it can be used, and how to be good consumers of research. So the podcast we recorded today, don't know if it'll beat yours out, don't know what schedule you're on, but whatever it'll come out, is just how to find and understand research papers, just to try to help people through that, so that was the idea, and that was the resource. And then I convinced Drew that it was a good idea. I caught him at a weak moment and signed him up for a weekly podcast, and I'm learning a lot. I mean, I'm reading stuff that I wouldn't normally read. I'm reading 1 or 2 things, 3 things every single week. So, it's hugely rewarding personally as well.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree 100% there. I've learned, I would say doing my podcast has just made me such a better safety professional, or even a better person, because the amount of people, like I said, I am literally your perfect audience, I think, because I even if I struggle to read anyway, so I can read a book, but I have to read it at night. Like throughout the day, I'm busy. But what I do is I love talking to people, and I love listening to interesting things. So podcasts has always been a thing for me. I love them. The longer the better. I'm a massive fan of long form. I love Joe Rogan stuff, like 4 hours conversation. I'm like, yes.
Or Rich Roll or someone.
Yeah, Rich Roll. I like Rich Roll. Rich Roll annoyed me the other day. He said something really bad about millennials, and I was just like, don't tar me with that brush because of the year I was born. Anyway, I do like Rich Roll stuff as well, and that's how I kind of learn, and that was one of the drivers for me doing the podcast, was selfishly, is that I just want to talk to people. I want to learn more, and I have learned so much. But the other thing is, like, there must be more people out there that just learn by listening, or haven't got time to sit down and read long books or long research papers, but they have got time to drive. Obviously they're driving, they're walking the dog, and they just think, I could learn whilst I'm doing it. There must be a kind of need for that. And I think we're all right, all of us, because we're seeing, when I started, there was only 2 podcasts in the UK. There was Sonny Gopal and Richard who do the Sonny Gopal. Unfortunately, now I think he stopped doing his podcast. Now there's 5, and then and from there, I think in the rest of the world, you probably have Todd Conklin was the most popular one in pre-accident investigation. I know Safety FM had quite a lot, but now, Jesus, it's just like boom. There's loads of us, because obviously it's great advertisement for your business, but there's a desire for this stuff. But I think what you two did, and I get to my point here now, is that what you two do so well is that you found that niche that there was no one else doing that. There was no one else getting research papers and translating them to like normal, uneducated people like me.
Oh, not uneducated, at all. Maybe just not as academically educated or whatever. But that word "educated" is a loaded thing to say. So, but I think, look, there's so many great, like you said, there's great. I mean, I like the idea of providing a resource. I'd complained a lot about the profession, and then I'd gone and kind of tried to learn a lot about the profession, and so I felt that it might be helpful to provide a resource. And podcast is, people who know me know that you rarely get away from a conversation quickly. Once we start talking. So I think podcast idea was good, but there's just so many people out there who are doing great interview stuff, like you mentioned. Yourself, and now people like Sam. Todd's always been there. Andrew Barrett in Australia here, and so I thought I could interview people and get a lot out of it. But what was the contribution that we could make? That maybe a little bit, not necessarily unique, but a bigger contribution from us in terms of what we could offer. And so we thought we had an opportunity, because most of my career has been on the practical side of the fence, and most of Drew's career has been on the academic side of the fence. So so I was just fortunate. I was just fortunate that he was up for it.
And that's a good dynamic. I really like that dynamic in your podcast. Is those two different dynamics, a real academic based person and that kind of practical experience or background. I think it works really well and complements really well. So I think it's a great partnership. And it's interesting, just quick, I will let you go in a minute, but Andrew, that you mentioned, who runs, it's Safety on Tap, isn't it, that he runs? It's a good podcast, actually. And I'd come across him, but in my early days in the podcast, we used to have a very cocky introduction to the first probably 10 or 15 episodes, that we were the only interesting and entertaining safety podcast in the world. Like I had no evidence to back that up other than my own arrogance. But it was just a very off the hoof comment, and fair play to Andrew. He'd obviously scoped me out as another podcast on the market, and he dropped me a message saying, I challenge you that you're the only interesting and entertaining podcast. So I was like, fair play, mate. I like that. I like that you challenged me. It was good.
No, Andrew's good like that. Andrew had me on. He was the first podcast that I ever got on and spoke about, and it was pretty much in the year that I started my PhD. So we're talking 5 years ago or so. So he's been at it for a long time and providing a great resource, over here, and he's a great mate too. So that's, but it's good. It's just such a big network now. I just love the fact, it comes with its challenges, but I just love the fact that we've got, a platform like LinkedIn to engage with each other. I love the fact that we've got, a podcasting platform, because when I was going through trying to understand my role as a safety professional and trying to explore my doubts, there was none of that. There was no podcast. There was no LinkedIn. There was no way to find, like, it literally was get a book. I don't think people realize, like, Facebook only started in about 2008, and like it seems like these things have been around forever, but they haven't. They absolutely haven't. So I definitely see more good in all of those platforms than bad. But and
the more the merrier. I think the more the merrier. I think that I've had a couple of people that have said, "Oh, you've got more competition now, James," and I'm like, "That's great. It's not competition whatsoever." And I don't say that from an arrogant point of view. Is everyone's got different voices, different accents, different ways they think about things, different like styles, etc. And there's thousands of millions of people in the world, and some hate my style of podcast, and that's okay, because they'll go over to Colin, like you said, in the UK, or they'll go listen to Andrew or the safety of work. That's fine. And there's some people that hate Colin's way of doing it. I can say that with Colin because I've got a good relationship with Colin, so that's fine. That's why I picked him. So they might hate the way Colin talks, and they're like, "Oh, I'll go listen to James," and that's cool, because we're all trying to do one thing. We're all trying to just make the world a little bit better, and I think it's great. And I think the more the merrier.
And that's great. And I love that. I love that approach that you've got there. And I think if you're having fun preparing content, and if you're learning and getting something personally out of it, then we said from the start, I think Drew and I said, is if one person takes something out of each episode, then we've won. That's success. So I remember at one point though, it's a bit hard not to get, when you see the downloads and when you've been in organizations your whole life and things get numbers driven and target driven. I was thinking at one point of, we need to, maybe we'll get Sid, maybe we'll interview Sydney Decker on the podcast, and, we might bump up the numbers a bit. And Drew was such an amazing guy, and, probably the guy with the most integrity of anyone I know. He's like, no, but Sid doesn't do any research. He's not for our podcast. And straight away, we just had that good reset around episode 25. We just had that good reset of no. This is what we're here to do. And it's not about kind of competition or downloads. Drew's going, calm down, David. It's not what it's about. And, we're good. We're true to that now. And so, like I said to you, the podcast we did today about how to find and read papers, he's going, well, this is probably, going to be the best for people who are doing research degrees, or just starting a research degree, and that's fine. They're our listeners too. So it's good. We got a narrow niche, like you said, but we're really clear in our own minds about what we're trying to, the resource we're trying to put out there.
It is, yeah. I think it's spot on. I think it's good to have that solid, that solid kind of mantra, and it's good that kind of Drew kind of held you to that, because it's so easy to get sucked in the numbers. I've been there, and I'm like, yeah, this is the podcast. This is the one that's going to take us, viral. We're now 1,000, and then it doesn't happen, and you beat yourself up, and like everyone looks at the numbers. I think I spoke to Jay Allen about this, and he was saying, everyone looks at the numbers, and that's cool. Don't say that you don't look at the numbers, because everybody does. But it's how you interpret those numbers and react to them, I think, is the difference. And I think that's spot on. You know what you're there for. And I think whilst your kind of niche is quite narrow to a point, I think it's narrow, but it's kind of really broad at the same time, because all of our profession will I think take some value from what you do, 100%.
Yeah, and it'll be hopefully over time there's a resource there, that people can sort of search through if they want to learn something about, risk matrices or behavioral safety or whatever it is. And there's tens of thousands of safety research papers that are out there, and then there's millions of papers in other disciplines like we've talked about, like business and psychology, and that we can learn about something to do with safety from. So where you're right in that context, where we can kind of talk about anything that someone's done some research on that we think has any sort of relation to safety, and we're not going to run out of people to interview. So but we are going to get more researchers on. We are going to talk directly to the people who write papers and sort of get their perspective on the work that they've done and other things like that. And we might try and test a few other types of little formats just to keep getting something out every week, basically. Yeah,
it starts to become a challenge. Right, I would genuinely going to let you go now. There's one last thing I would like to say, is that you did say in one of your podcasts that, unfortunately, to everyone that says good safety is good business, the evidence does not show that good safety is actually good business. And that peed all over my bonfire, because I've been saying that for years, that good safety is good business. I would like to see an episode exploring that a lot more. That'd be real nice.
Yeah, look, and just for some context, not to just leave that bomb out there, that's one of these things you talked about, Carsten Bush, earlier about, safety myths and things like that. It's one of those things that people just say. And it's a really mixed bag out there. There's research that's looked at companies' reported safety performance and then their share performance or profits over a certain period of time and said, oh, look, there's a bit of a trend there, but there's nothing really causal necessarily about that. There's some research that was done into Bhopal that said that the big explosion in India that said, oh, that was hugely profitable. They ran that plant super cheap by not spending on maintenance for years, and then when it blowed up, they got a huge insurance payout, and they never had to abandon or decommission the plant. And so there's lots of things that sort of say that, look, we might all believe it, but then when you look at it from a pure research point of view, there was another paper that we looked at that had compared all different construction businesses around the world and their safety performance and their profitability, and there was absolutely no relationship at all. There was businesses with great safety performance and terrible profitability and vice versa. Now,
I think that's what I was listening to this morning. I think that's what I was listening to this morning, actually. What was that one?
It just might kind of go that, that's the one. Yeah, there you go. That was How Professionals Influence, I think, Dowdigus.
Was it? Oh, no, zero harm policy. Was what I think you talk about the construction industry. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, it's topical. That's topical.
It is, yeah.
So look, I think I think it's a mixed bag. I mean, there's not a clear and direct relationship between the two things. I would still say to people that the things that you do to try to improve safety, to understand your work, to provide resources and support to your workforce, to have open communication in your business, to know what's going on and align your organization around what's important. If you're doing those things, you're probably going to end up running a better business. But you've actually got to explain it to people, not just say, implement this safety system and you're going to be more profitable.
Yeah. Thanks, bye. And then just walk off.
Yeah, thanks.
You got to give some context.
That's kind of behind my comment to say, if someone says good safety is good business, it's just what we're trying to do on the podcast, which is, show us the paper, just show us the research.
I like it.
Not to say it's not there, but we try to reserve judgment on the questions.
No, it's a great podcast. Congratulations, very well done. Thank you very much, David, for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to have a chat with you, mate.
No worries, great. Thanks a lot, James.
Okay, peeps, hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did and you love what we do at Rebranding Safety, maybe you want to work with us some more, maybe you want to buy some merch, maybe you even want to donate, you can do all of that at rebrandingsafety.com. So go to rebrandingsafety.com, check out our new website. It looks slick. Get yourself some merch, some new products coming soon. But if you're going to do anything, if you're going to do one thing, I would love for you to go to rebrandingsafety.com, scroll down to the bottom and subscribe to our mailing list, because, well, it just means I can hassle you a little bit more. Honestly, to be honest, we haven't got any plans to start a mailing list at the moment. I would like to get the list, but we haven't got a plan to do the monthly mail things because it's just too much work. But I really want your email because, well, I like to hoard data. I'm a GDPR worst nightmare. I don't know what's wrong with me. Anyway, I've got to end this because I need to edit some more podcasts. My wife needs to go collect the shopping, and I need to sit with my daughter for a little bit because she's freaking awesome. And I will catch you next week in the final interview reflection of the Safety 1, Safety 2 mini-series. And then after that, there'll be one big reflection on Safety 1 and Safety 2. And that's it. 2 more episodes. And that is it. Safety 1, Safety 2 Mammoth series is over. And we'll start talking about loads of other stuff. Catch you next week. Safe.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and its guest and do not necessarily reflect the position of the companies. Examples of analysis discussed within this podcast are examples only based on limited and dated open source information and should not be utilised in real life as the only solution available. Assumptions made within this analysis are not reflective of the position of the companies. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, stored or transmitted in any form or by any means, mechanical, electronic or otherwise, without prior written permission from James MacPherson.